Welcome to my show. A guest here. His name is Zac Spowart. Mr. Zac, how are you doing,
Spowart.
sir? All right.
Yeah, yeah, very good, very good. Thanks for having me. How are
Also,
you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Zac. And also, thank you so much for the time and the opportunity, Zac. Firstly, you are an author. You are also a sobriety guide and a coach. Can you please, Zac, discuss more about yourself and how you are doing currently now, Mr. Zac?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when it comes to sobriety guide stuff, I've been sober for 21 years. I got sober I'm sorry, I've been sober 19 years. I got sober at 21 years old. I'm 40 years old now, living in Bali, Indonesia, where I'm speaking to you from. But yeah, so what I've done is I've traveled the world. I've gone back to school. I've done a variety of different things. I've swam with dolphins, whales, sharks. I've gotten a pilot's license. I've done a number of these things all as a result of walking through my journey of getting sober. And why does sober make a difference? What does that have to do with anything? Well, what I found and what I touch on a lot in my book, Love Unlocked, which we'll get into later, is this idea that when it gets to whatever is like our core truth, whatever we have that's something we're excited about within ourselves that we really want to express into the world, if we don't tap into that and we maybe quiet it with drinking or with drugs or whatever it may be, we're just suppressing ourselves, we're lowering our energy levels, we're keeping ourselves subdued instead of allowing ourselves to be as expansive as we're meant to be. So that's a big part of my sobriety journey and story, and a big part of why I call myself a sobriety guide, which is, counselor, coach, all of these things. I have the degrees for them, but ultimately I like to guide people along their own sober journey. And then when we get into relationship and counseling on the other side of things, that's where I draw more on my clinical and master's degree background. But yeah, that's the sobriety guide portion of it. Thanks for asking.
And I'm also very much glad that you're in the position to experience one or two things when it comes to person being sober, and you have the experience, and this experience has brought you to a position whereby you can now use it as a guide, and also people that can understand when it comes to relationship and also other things as well, because our energy will always be within us. And we have to try our best to use it more wisely instead of using something to subdue those energy. And I would also like to drive
Absolutely.
to your book, Love Unlocked. Can you please,
Yeah.
Mr. Dark, discuss more on the book? And do you also plan to write more books in the coming future, Zach?
Yeah, thanks for just calling me Zach. Mr. Zach's fine too. I appreciate it, but Zach's good, man. Yeah, when it comes to, yeah, I would love to continue to write. Actually, writing is a huge passion of mine, and this is something that's been on my heart since I was 26 years old, and I'm 40 years old now. And um, I know with the onslaught of AI, there'll be a lot more books that come out, but this was something that I wrote without the use of AI. There's some infographics that were AI supported, but all of the text itself is all self-written, and so that was a huge part of what my journey was about. Was something that I wanted to cover. And too early on in life, I wasn't sure that I had the knowledge or the expertise, and who I do even now at 40. Well, this topic of love and personal relating and authentic relating, conscious relating, which is the subtitle, A Guide to Self-Acceptance and Conscious Relating, is fascinating to me. I love witnessing how people interact with one another. I love seeing how a man and a woman come together, or a man and man, woman and woman in this day and age. Like whoever is connecting with whoever, it doesn't matter. Like ultimately, I love seeing how people find each other and the way that they stay connected, or when they actively choose to disconnect and why they choose to disconnect in the ways that they do. It's something that is like, I think one of life's biggest mysteries is how we love the way that we love, why we love the way we love, and how 6, 7, 9 billion people, however many that number is up to, how we all how we end up with who we end up with, and how we end up in the ways that we end up with them. So we can go on about this forever, and I do, because it's my favorite thing. But that's where the book stemmed from, was just my absolute love and adoration for the art of love, call it the art of love, the act of love, the action of love, and just witnessing people go through life in the ways that they do through connections and overcoming a number of struggles and things of that nature, which we can get more into.
Exactly. Connection is very powerful. As you said earlier, it is a mystery. It is something that we really find very uneasy to explain. But when we get to a position
Right.
whereby we get to know someone and get the sense of connection, the emotion changes, the body changes. It is something we usually do not usually know how it happens, but it is always a mystery, as you said. And for us to also be in this kind of situations, there are also, as we said, there is nothing good that do not have its advantage and disadvantage. And most of the time, we must not be in the position whereby we make this affection or this relationship become something that will become a burden. And that is why I love the book you brought out, which is Love Unlocked, for people to understand more better when it comes to pattern and also things that they can also understand better in regards to loves and also relationship as well. And that is why I would like to drive to the position whereby many listeners can be in the position whereby they notice repeating patterns in their relationship. They realize that the constant relationship
Yeah.
they have to encounter, they realize the same thing continues to happen. How do you think they can try their best to begin to understand why they love the way they do? And do you think there were also those patterns, or do you think there is a certain position or a place where those patterns usually come from, Mr. Zach?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. And I think it's something that could take up the whole podcast, so I'll try to keep it as short as I can. But I think when you hit on the word patterns and that hits the nail on the head, these are all patterns. And if you're not familiar with the word pattern, right, like any pattern you think of a cloth or anything, a checkered pattern, it's just something that repeats. It's an established thing. It's like, one checker, and it repeats throughout the whole course of the shirt or the pants or whatever. So that's a pattern. So what does that look like in our everyday life? Well, it's something that was instilled in us or something that we adopted for whatever reason, and we repeat it over and over, like the checkers on the shirt. So if we don't interrupt that, if we don't change our shirt, if we don't, color it something new, we're going to have the checkered shirt on forever. So if that analogy works, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. But the point is, identifying the patterns first and foremost. We have to, or we can't change it. We can't introduce a pattern interrupt. But I think your question was more along the lines of where do these patterns come from? And the easiest answer, which I hate to pick on any of our parents here because they all did the best they could, I'm sure. But that's the rooted truth. We're imprinted. You think of a little duckling following the mom or whatever, right? We're imprinted at a very early age to based off of what we see. We're just gigantic sponges early on, forming our subconscious and our unconscious bodies and minds until we move into a more conscious realm, roughly around the age of 7 or 9, to then take that into our everyday living, to move more into executive functioning of our brain and more into a conscious awareness as opposed to an unconscious. You think of the child in playtime. But early on, we're absorbing everything, and that's imprinting deep in us. And all of that information then comes together, and we then take that and we kind of start the race of life at again, 7, 9 years old with those imprints, the patterns, the checkers that have been birthed and placed onto our shirts. So, if the pattern's off or if it's funky, then that's going to play out. And if we don't have anyone interjecting at any point in time, a pattern interrupt, being like, hey, that's not okay, or us, experiencing enough pain and hardship to want to shift and change, then those patterns are going to play out. And we see that, and we can talk more about it in a little bit, but in different labels that we experience, whether it's anxious, avoidant, all these different attachment styles that we uncover, as well as trauma bonds, and a bunch of other things that I cover in the book too. But yeah, ultimately, that's where the patterns begin, why they begin the way they do, and how they'll move forward if we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to interject and change them.
I sincerely appreciate your beautiful insights, Mr. Zach. We do know our parents play a huge role in our life. Our generations and people who have left us in the historic time plays a huge role, but there are also patterns as well. And if we do not stay in the position whereby we start to reflect on ourselves and recognize these little things that we realize about ourselves, and as you said earlier, pain is very essential because it is when we have pain and when we have some kind of something that really hurt us really badly, that is when we start to give a sense of shift towards some kind of situation or some kind of character we do when we are in a certain relationship. And we hope that we see a different outcome along the way in those perspectives. So there are a lot of
Right.
features, as you've said earlier, that really connect and also contribute to this certain situation when it comes to pattern and when it comes to repeating patterns that usually happen when someone is in a current relationship. And also, I would just like to drive to the area where you explore the
Mm,
hidden meaning behind love, because love
yeah.
had its own meaning, and you really explore in those perspective. So, what do you think are some of the unconscious beliefs about love that you think quietly shapes our choices without us realizing it, Mr. Zach?
Yeah, you're so beautiful with your questions. Thank you. I think any subconscious belief system is or unconscious, and that's why I started the last question without realizing the connection. But it's a good segue, is going to be imprinted within us. And so from there, what did we take? Did we have to perform for love? That's something that we often will find. Like, was I able to just be recognized for being whoever I was as a little boy, using me as an example, or a little girl for whoever else is out there, our female listeners. But ultimately, what was imprinted within us during that situation? Like, how did we have to show up? Was it performing for love, which I just mentioned? Or was it the opposite, which was maybe my parents or the people that raised me, put so much on me that love actually felt unsafe. But as a child, I'm not in a position where I'm able to receive that from my family or from my parent that was supposed to be parenting me, but maybe then spilled over onto me their emotions. Well, what's the byproduct of that? As a child, we can't leave the house. Our parents are providing for us, or in theory, they are. So, our caretaker, whoever they are, even if it's an abusive scenario. So, we find ways to dissociate, to disconnect. And that's where you get into the attachment styles, which is the first was more anxious, somebody that had to perform. So, anxious attached individuals who relate to that are people that are performance oriented people. They have to put themselves out there because they feel that they need to perform in order to receive love. And they're chasing that affirmation. Like, do you see me? Am I enough? Tell me I'm okay. Are we okay? Is everything okay? Right? Like, do I need to do more? Like, do I need to, like, all the time? But the opposite rings true for the avoidant. If we get into labels, and those are for the people who feel so saturated by love, where love becomes unsafe. And so when love's unsafe because they've been burdened, they've had to learn to dissociate, to disconnect because they can't run away. They don't understand boundaries. They don't understand that the family member that is putting all this on them in a negative, saturating space is too much. So the child has to find a way to protect themselves, and it does so by kind of shutting down and checking out. You think about if you're in a math class or something like that, you don't want to be there, right? You just kind of tune out. You start thinking about whatever you think about football or a TV show or whatever it is, and we space out and we disconnect. And that's not the greatest example together, but ultimately that saturation makes love feel unsafe for them. So now apply that pattern back to your first question. Moving forward, that person will be less likely to engage in deep seated relationships. They'll be more likely to engage in surface level relationships because it doesn't require them to feel the heaviness of what love is. So, the unconscious belief systems, to answer your question directly, stem directly from our imprinting, hence the unconscious portion of it. And if we're not paying enough attention to it, they're going to rule our lives. And I'll end with this really quick because I can get long winded on it. It's not that any one of these people are to blame. Our fight or flight response is a real thing. So when we're triggered, when we're activated, it's scary. Like, you think about being on the edge of a cliff, like you feel like you're gonna fall off if you're afraid of heights, like I am. And someone's telling you, you're okay, you're safe, don't worry, it's all right. And you apply that for an avoidant person who's in a relationship, and you're telling them you're safe, you're okay, it's okay, and they're like, I'm terrified, I'm gonna die, like I can't be here, I need to leave. And when you look at it from that light, it sheds a little bit, like, while it can be humorous, it sheds a little bit of opportunity for grace and empathy for that person, because none of us want to be sitting on the edge of a lead, like terrified. We all want to feel comfortable and safe. And so that's where the surface level interactions can come into play. But if they don't shift their way of relating, they'll stay stuck in surface level interactions or physical intimacy. This is more the avoidant person. And the anxious person will stay chasing, constantly performing for love. And they'll attract people that trigger those two things. Just ending on that, because again, I can talk about this forever. But the anxious person, more often than not, will always find somebody that triggers their need to perform. And then they will go out of their way to continue to do it. And they'll wonder why they have to keep performing for love. And the avoidant, more often than not, will attract the person that will smother them because rooted, they want the grounded, supportive love, but it's too much. And so they get triggered and they retreat. And so those cycles repeat.
I sincerely appreciate your beautiful insights, Mr. Zach. It shows that we are all different beings, and also the way we respond to emotions and the way we respond to love is usually different among ourselves. Some people, as you
Mm,
said, they get to a certain stage, they do not really, need to get too deep. Some usually need to get too deep. Some usually see how it plays out as the ancient type one and also the modern type one. Depend on how the pattern flows within us, and if we do not, because most of the time it is usually not easy to shift from some certain pattern as well. At times, when we are used to a certain pattern, probably from childhood, which has been a part of us, for us to make some kind of shift could be difficult, but it is something that we just have to try our best to shake things up at times. But despite we being different beings, we should try our best to understand the type of person we are so we can know the kind of pattern, also the kind of position we should always fit ourselves in. And that is why I would like to drive to the point of boundaries.
mm.
Despite we being different beings, despite we being from different perspective and the way we see emotions, we see it more differently. They are really essential, but most of the time they are always misunderstood. How do you
Mm.
think the listeners can try their best to set boundaries that really protect their autonomy while still allowing intimacy to still grow among them, Mr. Zach?
You just call me Zach, buddy. But yeah, but I appreciate the formality. Yeah, I think when it comes to it's a great question. These are all great questions. I keep saying that, but they are. When it comes to boundaries, but protecting your autonomy and then understanding the difference, like a few things come to mind. Like, first of all, the easiest boundary to recognize is this idea of offering ourselves permission to say no. If anyone out there has ever heard the expression of no as a complete sentence, it's true. You can just say no. It typically comes across very abrasive because we're not used to hearing it. It's usually yo no followed by I'm so sorry or maybe next time or let me make it up to you or blah 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 blah. But you can just say no. Can you have my cookie? No. Like I'm gonna have my cookie. You can't have it. Like and that's a small example, right? In the cookie scenario, but uh, more often than not, we're not comfortable with saying it, and that's fine. So we can come up with reasons why we need to give a little bit more to soften it a little bit. But ultimately, that is a great boundary, and our autonomy attached to that is rooted in our idea of self. So, in order to give a boundary, we have to know who we are. If we don't know who we are as individuals, I can't begin to give myself a boundary. I don't even know what I like and what I don't like. I have to understand myself. So, autonomy comes first and foremost with boundaries. I have to understand myself. And that's the root of the book. It focuses on authenticity as conscious relating. Like I have to be conscious of who it is that I am and the way that I interact in the world and the things that I desire and the things that I hope for so that I can then draw boundaries if somebody comes into my life that I want to maybe put a little bit of a wall up or say actually you're taking more energy from me than I'm receiving back from you or you're not giving me an exchange in this relationship that is comfortable for me to continue with and relationships can mean anything. It can be familial, family members, it can be spouses, it can be siblings. Obviously, I already said that. It can be friends, coworkers. So it doesn't really matter the relationship. It's all the same. The underlying factors is what am I comfortable with for myself? What is my desire for myself, for my state of living, the way that I want to live, in the lifestyle that I want to live, and what's appropriate for that. I'm not saying be over the top egregious and selfish with everything and to hell with everyone else. That's not appropriate or reasonable. But we do need to recognize we're like, okay, say for example, I need 8 hours of sleep. Most of us do. Some people need less. But let's just say I need 8 hours of sleep. It's kind of an accepted norm. Well, if my partner every morning needs 6 hours for whatever reason, God love them, she, whomever, like your partner is, if they need less sleep than you, and they just wake up in the morning, they start blaring their music and they're hopping around every night, every day, they're going to have their needs met at 6 hours, and you're going to be exhausted because that person has not allowed you to sleep. So I know that I need 8 hours. They might know that they need 6 hours, but at the end of the day, like, we're not a match. And that doesn't mean as a couple, that means something needs to shift, or I'm going to be suffering, or you're going to be suffering, whoever it is in this analogy. So specific to the 8 hour sleeper, they need a boundary. And that boundary can be as far as, look, in the morning, if you need to wake up, you need to quietly excuse yourself so that I can sleep 2 more hours, because I'm not going to make it if I got to do 6 hours every night. And then you can go have a kitchen, you can go do whatever you need to do. Or you take it to a further extreme, which some people do, and they sleep in separate beds, and they have time when they connect together intimately in their own form and fashion, and then they sleep separately, and then they do whatever they want. And that sounds not super romantic, I know, but hey, if everybody's sleeping and they're happy and nobody's grumpy, how about that? Like, you can live a pretty happy life. It's much better than the 8 hour sleeper not getting 8 hours and being bitter and miserable and resentful towards their partner who only needs 6 or 7, even, and then being just angry all the time, because then the relationship will suffer. If you have children, the children will suffer, work will suffer. The ripple effect of something so simple as, I just need to be able to sleep as much as I need to sleep, and hopefully the person on the other side will hear that and respect that. And so that's just the first boundary that jumped into my head, the sleep. We could cover a myriad of them. There's tons of them out there. But hopefully that example resonates well with the listeners of, it's about you. And it's not you because you're being selfish. It's you so that you can show up as your best self, which is a beautiful form of selfishness. If we don't give ourselves the self-love and attention that we need to show up, we're doomed to be less than our best selves. And then the ripples of fact can lead to shame, remorse, guilt, and then it can turn into this horrible spiral that just makes us feel crappy. And nobody wants to feel crappy, all just because we needed to sleep a little more. So again, got a little long-winded, but it's a good example. I hope that will resonate with people out there.
To definitely resonate with them. We definitely want to try our best to understand ourselves, know who we are, because that is when we know the sense of boundaries that we are meant to take and meant to not take. When we understand what makes us happy, what makes us not to be happy, what gives us joy, and also what gives us sadness, and we know how to manage those things within ourselves as humans, we are good to go when it comes to making boundaries, because we do know what really hurts us and what does not, and we do know how we can deal with situations with more wisdom and more patience as well. I would just like to squeeze in and also drive to the point of people, because this is very serious. People who really struggle to stay connected to themselves while they are in a relationship, when they have gotten to a sense in a relationship, for
Mhm.
them to stay connected to still themselves and know what they are meant to do at the right time, it starts to become a struggle for them. So what do you think from the experience you've had are probably practices that help listeners to try to maintain that self-acceptance and identity alongside closeness, Mr. Zach?
Yeah, so if I understand your question correctly, it's how can people how can they maintain themselves through, I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking. How can they maintain themselves and not lose themselves in relationship? Is that kind of the gist of the question? Or did I
Exactly.
miss
When they're
something?
in a relationship, they
Oh,
should not lose themselves.
great. Thank you for just repeating that so I don't speak on something totally different. Yeah, so relationships are always going to be, in theory, our highest level of like a test for who we truly are. And because it's easy to be who we are when we're by ourselves, there's nobody around to bother us. We can do whatever we want. And so, if you want to play video games all day, you play video games all day. If you want to watch TV all day, you watch TV all day. I mean, with the exception of obviously societal norms and ways that we have to make a living, et cetera, et cetera, nobody's really going to be there to tell you what you can and can't do. Eat all the cake you want, do whatever. However, when we enter into relationships, of course, that person I just mentioned, which were hypotheticals and extremes, you know, now all of a sudden we have consideration for this other person that's in our lives. And it's what do they need? What are their needs from us? How can we show up for them? And in that process, we also start to like, I used to, this analogy of kind of like two blobs. And in the beginning, the blobs are coming together and they're trying to figure out how to form to each other. And then we establish a sort of pattern of how we connect. And so when the blobs come kind of together as one, as a relationship goes, we're feeling each other out. And that can be to your question of like when the two blobs become one, have we now lost ourselves? And so, and again, it goes back to the roots of our authenticity. Like who are we? We have to know who we are, what our desires are before we can even go into relationship. And then from there, we can have the boundaries, which you also touched on, which is beautiful form of questions, as they all segue into each other, because then we can be like, hey, I need to do this in order to maintain my integrity myself so that I can show up as my best self in this relationship and for others, including potentially children or family members or the workspace or whatever it may be. But ultimately to preserve the safety of that relationship. Because without realizing it, the other party could be pushing this individual out of their appropriate norm of operating, and that can then trigger a negative impact on the relationship itself, thereby hurting this person, which of course was never what they wanted in the first place. But relationships are mirrors, and they're triggers more often than not for each other. So the person that maybe doesn't clean up the house as well as you do, like every time they don't clean up very well, is going to be a little bit irritating. And we can yell at them and be like, hey, you need to clean up better, like pick up your dishes, do this and this. And maybe they will. But if they're not wired that way, they might just not even see the dishes. Some people are like that. And I can view that as a personal attack, that my partner in this made up analogy scenario is not doing the dishes because they just want to be a jerk. Or I can recognize that, like, okay, this person is just being a person having their day. And equally, I'm going to do the same. There's probably some things I do that will trigger and irritate them.
Mm,
So we have to be mindful of, what are our triggers for that person and what are the triggers that, we have towards them. And ultimately be able to walk through that and to not lose ourselves, to answer your question directly, because I don't know if I did the best job answering it. To not lose ourselves directly, we have to understand ourselves as grounded as we can be. And then when these scenarios come when we feel like the person is maybe trying to push us to be somebody different, I'm not saying we should be a slob if we're not one to pick up. It's okay to learn to pick up the house a little bit more. That's called compromise. But at the end of the day, we don't want to lose who we are. If I'm somebody who needs like a daily run by myself every day, and that makes me whole, then I need to do that. And that
yeah,
might require waking up early. That might require something else that doesn't bother my partner. That goes back to compromise as well. But I need to make sure that I stay true to myself of what my needs are. So if I'm working out a certain way, diet is huge.
yeah,
The impact that we have from our significant other, if they like sweets and pizza and all this other stuff that is maybe less healthy and you're a very healthy oriented person,
mm,
you can have a match. That doesn't mean you can't match, but dinners are going to look very strange. They're going to look very different. And so, if it's really important to this person to be a healthy eater, and it's really important to this person to have whatever they want whenever they want it, as long as that doesn't break the relationship, you got a thumbs up. As long as that doesn't break the relationship, then it's more important that this person stays true to themselves. Otherwise, they will become resentful, goes back full circle to what we said earlier, towards the partnership, and they will lose themselves, which is more important. They will be resentful towards themselves for getting away from the diet, for getting away from the sleep, for getting away from the gym routine. These are just scenarios I'm throwing out there. I'm not
yeah,
suggesting that anybody has to do a gym, diet, whatever. But
yeah,
these are discipline scenarios that if people fall away from them, they're more likely to be mad at their partner and
yeah.
ultimately mad at themselves. And that's just that's where people lose themselves in relationships, as they fall away from the things that they enjoy for themselves because the other partner doesn't necessarily enjoy them. And that's where we just have to be careful. Compromise is important, but not to the degree where you're losing yourself.
I sincerely appreciate your beautiful insights. When we do know
Mhm.
ourselves, we will be in the position whereby we even know the right person that we can actually give this kind of intimacy for, because we do know our boundaries, we know our ups, we know our down, and that gives us the chance to also connect with the right people as well. And as you said earlier, people might be different. Some things people see as annoyance might be what someone else see as a sense of happiness, and that is why we have to understand ourselves as humans. And also, Mr. Zach, there is a question I normally ask during the end of the show. From our forefathers, from our ancestors, there are a lot of beautiful things that do exist during our ancestral time that is missing in our time today. If there is anyone or anything you would like to bring back to our time today, Mr. Zach, what do you think that thing will be, Mr. Zach?
Anyone or anything. That's a great. I've said this to every one of your questions. Yeah, that's a good one. There's so many beautiful people that have come through our lives, and so many incredible teachers. I mean, the first one that pops into my head is Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, obviously, the "I Have a Dream" speech. I think it's just going to be world renowned forever, and it's just changed lives forever. Um, I guess I'll just stick with that one. I feel like there's so many I'd
Yeah,
want to touch on, right? There's so many
yeah,
incredible adventurers that have gone through the most insane situations to cross over mountains and all these things. I would love to pick their brains. Like, what were you thinking? Like, how did you survive? Like, what was going on? But yeah, I think if I just have to pick one right off the cuff, I'm just
yeah,
going to go with my gut answer. That was Martin Luther King Jr. Because to stand up in the time of oppression in the
yeah,
way that he was, and you know, to ultimately be killed for his belief system, but to have sparked the movement that he has
yeah,
in the name of equality as human beings, which to me is a huge portion of even what the book itself. I mean, Martin Luther King was so big on love as well, and so many are, you know, in the roots of equality, of just human to human connection, heart to heart connection. It's that's it, you know, it's one love, Bob Marley, right? I mean, I get into
yeah,
him. Like there's a million people, so many beautiful souls that have walked this
yes,
planet and this earth that have been before us, that have paved the way, and you know, forefathers, you know, ancestors, just incredible human beings. You know, there's that quote, "We stand on the shoulders of giants
mm,
before us." I think it was Sir Isaac Newton or somebody said that, and it's this idea that we are able to see to the degree that we see today because the people that came before us have been
mm,
so great and they've done so much work that we're literally charged with some of the best and brightest minds that we get to just take from what they've left us, and then we get to have these types of conversations to move forward. And yeah, so I feel really inspired to share that, really inspired by your
exactly.
question. Thank you.
Exactly. I also want to thank you from the great book you brought to the table, which is Love Unlocked. I sincerely appreciate you for the great work and also the contribution you've had as well. And as we said earlier, we have a lot of ancestors, people who have done great things. There are some people that we do not imagine they could also make a change, but they do make a change. And that is a reward that many people are usually having in our time today. And that is the beauty. We have to, as usual, at times make sacrifice just for the greatness of those that are coming in the coming future. I also want to use this opportunity to thank you for the time, the opportunity you've given to me today. Thank you so much, Mr. Zach.
Absolutely. No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time. And yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have been here, and loved your questions. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
All right. Have a wonderful day, Mr. Zach. Bye bye.
You too. Bye bye.